Hello, I'm Alex Bradley, and welcome to your new office. I'm proud to represent the Office Commercial BG in helping you deliver the new Office Enterprise pitch deck. This is based on extensive feedback that we received in the last fiscal year when we delivered the Office Futures pitch in the Redmond EBC to over 260 enterprise customers. Based on that feedback, as well as customer feedback at the preview event in San Francisco and at MGX from all of the field sales partners, we've developed this new Office Enterprise pitch deck. This should be used in all EA renewals or net new Office sales discussions with enterprise customers. You've got some choices to make about how to deliver this deck. It's a great deck if you're not able to deliver a demo as part of the presentation. It shows a range of different scenarios as to why the new Office is great for enterprise customers. But we all know that showing is better than telling, and we'd strongly recommend doing a demo as well as the presentation. You've got three options as to how you deliver this presentation. There are three different types of demos that you can use. The first is the Office Enterprise Hero demo. It's about half an hour long and requires some setup and some specialized hardware, such as a slate and a laptop. It's a great option to give a full demonstration of the range of value in the new Office. A shorter demo would be the Office Click to Run demo that shows customers how easy it is to deploy the new Office in a matter of seconds. The final demo that you could choose would be a customized demo that you would build based on your customers' needs and interests. Always a good option. We're already delivering this pitch and demos to the customers in the EBC, and based on feedback that we receive, as well as data from the RDP programs, we intend to evolve this deck between now and general availability. So please, get out there, present and demo to your customers, and give us that feedback that we need. Good luck and enjoy the new Office. Well, hello and welcome to the Microsoft campus. Thank you so much for coming and spending your time, with us in these couple of days in the EBC. It means a lot to us. My name is Alex Bradley. I'm a Senior Product Marketing Manager with the Microsoft Office Division, and I'm here today to share some of the investments that we're making around the new Office. The reason I'm here to share this with you, I've been here for about 8 years, 4 of which I was in the United Kingdom as a solution sales specialist focused on the media and entertainment sector. And then the last 4 I've been here in Redmond helping to launch some of our online services, such as the Business Productivity Online Suite and Office 365. And with this release of the new Office, we're bringing together the cloud and Office 365 together with the traditional Office clients like we've never done before. So it's quite an exciting time for us. Just a brief note before we dive into the content. Whilst we've done our first public disclosure of this content, and we've shared a lot of information, everything in this presentation that I have here today is public knowledge, so feel free to share this when you get back to the office. There are some things that may change. The product is still to be released, so please don't take this as being set in stone, so just to be aware of that. What I'd like to do to start off is spend some time looking at where we've been making investments over the last couple of years. As a corporation, we spend about $9.5 billion a year in research and development. That's more than any other technology company. So we take those investments very, very seriously. The Microsoft Office division is one of our largest and most important divisions. And so when we take those investment or research and investment dollars, where are we putting those? Where have we been making investments for this next wave of products? And we really think that these 3 areas are areas that have been seeing substantial change and that we've been wanting to address in this release of the product. First and foremost, and I see a variety of devices here on the table today, Microsoft, non-Microsoft, and so on. The world is a different place than it was when we launched Office 2010. If you think about it, the iPad hadn't even been introduced. So we've seen not only a proliferation of tablets, but also mobile devices. As you see here, over 1 billion smartphones will be shipped by 2016, and most of those will be used at work. The average American adult today owns 3 devices. So it's a very different world than we were 10 years ago, where people really had one device, maybe a desktop or a laptop at work, and then they went home. So that's been a big area of focus in terms of providing our capabilities out across these devices. So the second area that we've been focused on is this area of people. First and foremost, making the software easy and intuitive to use, and also a beautiful user interface. But also recognizing how people have changed how they communicate. I'm sure we're all on Facebook. We probably use LinkedIn. A lot of us have Twitter accounts. That has really changed the way that people communicate. If you look at some of the younger demographics, their primary form of communication today is using social networking, not the traditional email or instant messaging. So it's clear that this is an area where a lot of people are wanting to adapt how they work. So we've really been thinking hard about how to bring some of those social networking capabilities or features that people are familiar with into the enterprise in a way that is secure and manageable. And the final area of focus is around the cloud. We've seen huge growth in our online services. If we think back 4 years ago, we didn't have a public cloud service. And today, we offer Office 365 in over 88 countries. We think that the cloud is going to become the prevalent way of procuring software, not only as a way of delivering services, but also a way of changing the client experience. So these are the areas that we've been making investments and where we've seen the world of work changing. What I'd love is to hear from you, do these resonate with you? And is there an area that is particularly of interest for your business?
I want to stop buying many devices for my employees. I would like for them to bring their own device to use. However, I would still like to continue to provide them with service.
Absolutely. That's a trend that we hear a lot from customers. And a lot of people refer to that as the consumerization of IT, where employees are wanting to bring their devices into the enterprise, whether it's an iPhone, a Windows Phone, a BlackBerry, and you want to provide services across all of those different devices. Is that fair to say?
Correct.
Excellent. We've really been focused on that and allowing you to do that, but also do it in a secure, controlled manner with the services that we have. So before we dive into the product, I just wanted to spend a moment talking about our broader productivity vision. And this is something that hasn't changed since the previous release, but it's useful to sort of give you an idea of what's important to us as we make these investments. First and foremost is this idea of the best productivity experience across devices. It's fair to say that in the past, Office has been, a PC-centric, whether that's a Windows or a Macintosh product, and then we obviously had the server products. But now we're very much thinking about what is the right experience across those different devices that your employees are wanting to bring in, whether it's a mobile device, a slate device, a PC, or even a browser. It's not necessarily going to be the same experience, but we want it to be the best experience for that form factor. Not necessarily taking the full client and ramming it onto a small smartphone, but thinking about that device, thinking about those productivity scenarios, and making it a great experience across a range of different devices.
So does that include the iPad?
That's a great question. And I think for us, we absolutely believe and will continue to be first and best on Windows. We think that Windows is the best way forward for Windows and Office, but we also recognize that there are these different platforms in the market, as you alluded to, Paul, with the different devices that your employees are wanting to bring in. So what we've done today is we already have OneNote and Lync apps for the iPad, and we will continue to support those apps, and we will also continue to support access to the Office web apps using iOS. We've shown that we will invest in those areas and on other platforms in areas that make sense to enable this best experience. And at the moment, that's what we're sharing. So the second area here is around this idea of the cloud on your terms. Most enterprises of any size will have a mixture of on-premises and online software. We don't want to make it a cloud ultimatum in terms of saying, in order to get this, you must move to the cloud. But we do see a lot of customers viewing the cloud as a way of reducing the overall IT spend, whilst also increasing the services that they provide to their employees, and also getting out of that routine maintenance and upgrade business. So for the parts of your business where, take email, for example, that's often the first step that customers make. I would contend that email is not a competitive advantage for your company. Do you think it's a competitive advantage? But it's mission critical. So you want a secure, reliable service. but at a reasonable cost. And so that's why we've seen customers moving email to the cloud. Now, what we mean by that is sometimes they'll pick a certain group of users. So for a lot of companies, they've picked factory workers or delivery drivers or non-office-based workers to put into the cloud and remained on premises for their other users. But the key there is they manage it centrally across those different worlds. And then you can move over time at your own pace. So we give you this flexibility and choice. So not only the best productivity experience across these devices, but also a range of different options in terms of how you deploy it, but with a common management experience. And then the final part of our productivity vision is really around the breadth of where we make these investments. And you see these areas along the bottom of the screen. Collaboration for us and productivity isn't just about making Word documents or PowerPoint or Excel. It's really about these integrated capabilities that go across client servers and services that really take it from being what I term personal productivity, an individual working by themselves in office, to organizational productivity, where we're thinking about content management. For example, some of the work that we've done with publishing companies where Word becomes a front end into SharePoint and a workflow that ends up in their content management system. So their journalists are no longer working in a silo and then having to go to different applications in order to post their stories. They work in Word and then they file into SharePoint right from within that application. That's a great example of personal productivity versus organizational productivity. And there's no other provider that works and recognizes this breadth of different areas. So what does this mean for the new Office? Well, we think that there are these 4 areas that we've really invested in and we think that there's going to be a lot of change in. And the first, and we've already discussed this with the devices question, is around what we want to do in terms of providing that best productivity experience. Now, we think that we're going to have a great story to tell of Office on Windows 8. So the Windows RT slates, for example, that will be shipping before the holidays this year, they will come with a native Office experience, and that's going to be a great competitive differentiator for those products. If you think of other slate products today, I think often they're very consumption-orientated devices. You browse the web, you maybe watch a video, but if you have to do work, most people probably get out their PC. Whereas what we're going to be able to do with Office on Windows 8 slates, it's really going to change that game. And there are some things that we're able to do on that Windows platform that we can't do anywhere else. A great example is pen and inking. So touch input with your fingers is great. Keyboard input is great. But we think that on a slate, the ability to use a pen, think about note-taking in this sort of environment. Often people don't necessarily need the full PC, but they want that lighter weight, long battery device that they can take meeting notes with. And that's a great example of a differentiator that we can provide on that Windows platform. The second area, as mentioned, is around the cloud. And I've talked about the impact of services on our business and also how customers are adopting email and other services from Microsoft. But it also impacts the client. Microsoft Office was the first product to use the MSI installers. And what we mean by that is where you have to download the product, unpack it, install it. It can take up to 5-10 minutes to download, and then you take up to another maybe 15-20 minutes to unpack and install it. Office 97. Think of how much change has happened in our industry since then. I bet that none of us are driving cars that were made in 1997. Yet a lot of customers are still using products designed back then. And we haven't changed the installation paradigm since then. That's what we're changing for the client in this release. And the cloud is what's enabling us to do that. And you'll have Office in a matter of seconds delivered to a PC on demand. We think it's going to be a great game changer in terms of how customers deploy Office. It also enables us to introduce a new application development model. I'll talk more about that later in the presentation. And of course, we want to do this in a secure, reliable manner. Today, we offer a 99.9% financially backed service level agreement. We'll continue to do that, and we're investing in making the service as secure and reliable as possible. Social is this third area. We already talked about how people are evolving how they communicate and how they interact with people. In the business world, think of the impact of LinkedIn. in terms of how HR departments now search for applicants. And they've vastly reduced the time and effort and money involved in finding candidates to hire. That's been a great cost saver for businesses. The same way for most of us who are on social networks like Facebook, it's been a great way to connect on a personal level. And we want to bring in some of those capabilities into the next version of Office. We're investing in the core products that we already have, but you've also seen the recent acquisition of Yammer. Yammer has over 250,000 users already, and we think that's going to be a great story in terms of SharePoint and Yammer together from a social networking perspective. But social networking doesn't just mean SharePoint or online. We also think it means real-time communications. Lync has been a phenomenal product that has seen huge uptake. It's one of the fastest growing businesses at Microsoft, and certainly within the division is on track to be a billion-dollar business. But today, most companies use Lync internally or in an external voice capacity. What we're going to be able to do in this next version is federate out with Lync to Skype. And that brings me on to that final point of control. We want to do all of this in a manner that gives you options, that you can deploy the way that you want, but is secure, auditable, and controllable. We've made a lot of investments in areas such as data loss prevention. A great example of that is what we call policy tips, where within the body of an email, whether you're in the Outlook web app or in the Outlook client, based on certain policies that you can define, Outlook will prompt the end user to make sure that they're aware of certain potential policy violations. A great example of that is PCI compliance that a lot of customers face in terms of making sure that they don't send personally identifiable information or credit card information in unencrypted or unsecure emails. You can set up a policy tip that will scan those mails proactively and tell the user that this is not compliant, helping them to be compliant. That's a good example of some of the investments. The second and final point here is around, I touched on the hybrid scenario where you're going to be managing online and on-premises services. The key there is to have a common management, a unified management across those different applications such that you can control your users, your services in a way that makes sense for you and doesn't increase complexity, but consolidates and makes it more simple for you to manage. So now that I've covered off these four main areas of investments, what I'd like to do is step through each of the four and show you a little bit more of the product and where we've made some of these changes. So first up, let's talk about devices. Now, what you see here is a screenshot of Outlook on a PC. And this could be a desktop or a laptop PC, but also a slate device. And immediately what you'll see is a much more simple, clean, uncluttered look. The engineers, as they were building this, wanted to build a product that was both beautiful and gorgeous. I think this is very much a more modern user interface in line with what people expect both from web applications and client applications. And I've been using it now for a while, and I find it much more intuitive and a really, really beautiful way to work. What you also see is a much more simple user interface. We've pushed things out a little bit to make it more finger-friendly, so that if you are on a touch-enabled device, whether it's a laptop with a touch screen or on a slate device, it's easier to get access to bits of functionality. And on the right-hand side, you see these quick actions. So once you've selected an email, you have these available to you. In this case, reply, delete, flag, mark as read as an example. If it was a meeting request, you'd see a different range of functionality. So again, without having to go into that mail or change the view, you can get access to the most commonly used features wherever you are. The final thing I'd point out here is if you think of previous versions of Outlook, they've had a task pane on the right-hand side where they've had your month, top people that you've contacted with, your tasks. Now that took up quite a bit of screen real estate. So what we've done here is we've collapsed those down, and you see them on the bottom here. And I'll show you what we've done with those to make them more interactive in a moment. But by doing that, we've expanded the real estate to make it much more focused on the content versus the Chrome.
Well, does that mean that the ribbon is gone?
What you see here is at the top, you see that home, send, receive, folder, and view. The ribbon is still there, but it's minimized. So if you were to click on something like an image or another piece that would require ribbon-type functionality, the ribbon will, present itself so that you have those controls that are very contextual in terms of based on what you want it to be doing. But what we've done is minimized it to make it this more seamless and simple user interface. Of course, if a user wanted to, they could pin the ribbon such that it was there the whole time as well. It's very customizable in that sense in terms of how users want to use the product. So here's what I mean in terms of these getting access to the mail, calendar, people, and tasks without needing a full tasks pane on the right-hand side. If you hover over calendar in this example, it pops up this little what we call a peak, and it's showing you not only the month that we're in at the moment, but also the calendar appointments for this day. And I love this. So the scenario here is, think that you've just received a mail, and it's asking you if you can come to a meeting or have coffee at 3 p.m. on Wednesday. Without needing to leave that message, you can hover over your calendar, select the day, and very quickly see whether you can go to that coffee. And the other piece that I really love and that people that I've shared this with have really appreciated is what we call this inline reply. So if you think today, if you click on a mail and click on reply, it pops up a new window for you to write that reply in. Now, in a world in which you're on a desktop or on a laptop, that's kind of okay because you have a mouse, you have a keyboard, you can switch between things very easily. But even on those devices, I've lost count of the number of times I've gone into a colleague's office and they hover over Outlook on the taskbar and this huge list pops up of mails that they haven't, clicked on send to. And it's quite confusing to find the message that they're actually looking for. In this instance, all they have to do is click on reply, and within that one window, it's not popping it out, it's within that main Outlook window, there's that reply. And the really neat thing is, if you write a sentence, for example, and then click off of that mail without sending it, traditionally, or what's happened in the past, is that that mail would go into your drafts folder. Now, it's not the end of the world. If you want to get access to it again, you have to click over to drafts and open it up. But in this case, with this inline reply, it stays with that message. So if you click off and then back into it, without having to go to drafts, it keeps that draft in the line of the conversation. So if you think about that, in that scenario, can you meet for coffee 3 p.m. on Wednesday? You don't have to leave the window to reply or look at your calendar to determine whether you can respond to that request. It's a really nice way. If you think of that devices, people, and cloud, we've really focused on that user interface and made it a much more personal and intuitive experience. Moving on, I wanted to show you a different example. The previous screenshots were the same whether you were on a laptop or a desktop. What you're seeing here is a Windows Slate device, a tablet. And when you're presenting a PowerPoint, it shows you, it's able to show you this presenter view. And what that means is rather than duplicating the presentation on the screen, which is what most people do today, it's going into this presenter view where you can see the slide that is being presented, you see the next slide that is coming up in the presentation, as well as speaker notes, how far through the presentation you are, a time, how long you've been in the presentation. So it's enabling you to be a better presenter. So I could be here and I have my little cheat sheet, notes, of the statistics, for example. And the really neat thing here is you see this inking. So on this Slate device, I mentioned some of the things that we're able to do on top of a Windows device that we're not able to do maybe on other devices. And I mentioned inking as a key example. This is a really good way of adding on to that meeting notes scenario that I discussed. This is a different scenario where inking could be valuable, where you're presenting and you're able to annotate a slide on the fly, and also using touch interfaces. So not just inking, but using touch. If you think of navigating online media or on a web page today on a Slate, you can pinch to zoom and whatnot. You can do that same thing here in PowerPoint. So if you zoom out, it'll show you all of the slides in the presentation, and you can very quickly go to the next slide or a different slide without having to leave the presentation, change the slide, and re-present. It's a really interesting scenario. And the final thing I'll mention here is the way that we're making it much more intuitive. So when I plugged in my laptop, automatically, and presented, automatically Windows knew that that's what I wanted to do. So it put my laptop into display or extend mode. So it extended my desktop, is presenting the slides, but I'm seeing the presenter view. So it automatically knew these things and just made it even easier for me. And the final thing it did was it set my link status, my online status, to do not disturb, because it knows I'm presenting. And it would be a little bit embarrassing for a colleague to, instant message me in the middle of a customer presentation. So it's just making it easier for people to be better presenters.
Is this tablet-only functionality?
Today, it's a Windows functionality. So you can get access to it whether you're on a Windows PC or a Windows Slate. And so we think that's a great scenario of, again, why we think that Windows and Office together is a better scenario. Here's an example of what we think a touch-enabled application could look like. So the screenshots that you've seen up to this point have been the desktop applications, that you could use on a Slate, of course, but also on a PC. And, the same regardless of which form factor you're on. However, we recognize that on Slate devices, we might want to have a different or a more touch-enabled scenario. And so what you see here is OneNote enabled for that touch and Slate scenario. What I think is great about this screenshot is it shows that it's a little bit more simple. Rather than take the full OneNote client and just put it on a Slate, so going from a bigger screen with a mouse and a keyboard to a Slate, it's a different form factor. So rather than taking exactly the same experience and putting it on that smaller device, we've tried to customize the application, or we have customized the application for that scenario. So if we think back to the question that you asked earlier around, the best productivity experience, we're really trying to make it the right experience, not only the best experience, but the right experience for that form factor. And I love this user interface that you see here with this radial dial. So I mentioned today that a lot of Slates are very consumption orientated. You look at the web, you maybe watch a video, but if you want to do something, if you want to edit something, chances are you're going to get out your PC. What we've done here with this radial user interface, you'll see that the word agenda just below the title is highlighted. Once you've highlighted a word, this radial menu pops up and gives you certain options. And what you can see is undo, font size, copy, color, bold, the typical things that you might want to do to change that word agenda. And so if you hit that A in the middle and swiped out to font size, so again, touch enabled, but you swipe out to font size, the radial dial changes and you get this rev counter, like on a car. And you can scroll up and down to change the font size. So it's a really gorgeous, very intuitive way of changing, the font size and making that touch experience a more productive experience. The other thing to note here is the picture. So often, based on top of, a Windows Slate, they will have cameras as part of that hardware. So leveraging, you have Windows taking advantage of the hardware, and Office sitting on Windows, and that full integration, so you're able to take a photo with that camera and it can come straight into OneNote. You can crop it, you can edit it, you can ink it, and that's a really good example of where you've got the hardware, you've got Windows, and you've got Office working together. So now we've covered off on the devices pillar. Let's spend a moment talking about the impact of the cloud on this new release of Office. First off, the Office client has been totally reimagined to be a service in this release. So I mentioned earlier on changing the way that we think about deployment. Today, we still use that MSI-based installation methodology, whereby we have to download, unpack, and then install. That can take up to half an hour or more, depending on the hardware and the network connection. The new Office has been designed from the ground up to be a service, streamed on demand. So what you see here is a user who's signed in to the Office 365 portal online. That could be on a machine that you know, that you control, that is a domain joined device, or it could be a PC when they're traveling. So regardless of the machine that they're on, they can log into the Office 365 portal. And as you see here, with one click, install software, they come to this page where they can manage how many machines that they're installing on. And this is the really neat thing about Office being a per-user service. And this is a shift, but you can install it on multiple devices. So if you think today with Office Software Assurance, which is what you have in your professional desktop enterprise agreement, that is licensed per device. Now, as I mentioned, in a world where the average American adult already has 3 devices, that licensing model probably needs to evolve. So at the moment, the current planning or the current thinking is to deploy Office or give them the rights to deploy Office on up to 5 PCs and up to 5 mobile devices. So that means up to 5 Windows or Macintosh PCs and 5 mobile devices, Windows phones, iOS, Blackberries, Windows Slate devices, and so on. That's a pretty broad range and a high number. And so coming back to this, what you've seen is the user has signed in, clicked on install, has come to this page where they can see, how many they've used, and then can manage their devices themselves, taking an administrative burden off of yourselves. And then here, clicking on install, click on run, and what you see within a matter of seconds, because we're using application virtualization technologies instead of that old MSI-based installation where you had to download the entire package before you could unpack it and install it. By using virtualization, the product is broken up into multiple components. So it streams down the first package within a matter of seconds, depending on the bandwidth available to that device. And then Office is on that device.
How does it know what to stream?
That's a great question. And the reason I love that question is because it allows me to talk about the Customer Experience Improvement Program. Terrible name, great program. What we do with the Customer Experience Improvement Program, if you've ever installed our products, once you've installed it, it asks you if you'd like to send back anonymized data about how you use the product to Microsoft. Do you remember that when you've installed things? I always ask that you please do that, because as a result of that anonymized data that is sent back, we have great analytics and telemetry in terms of what features and functionality end users use and how they get access to that functionality within the client. So thinking about these packages, these virtualized packages that the product is broken up into, we've prioritized the features and the functionality based on how people or how often people use those features and functionality.
Is it only available on Windows 8?
It's available on Windows 7 and Windows 8. So this click to run is what we term this functionality. You can get access to that on Windows 7 or Windows 8. So I did mention those up to 5 PCs or Macintoshes. If you're using an older Windows or a Macintosh, you'd still use the more traditional download and install mechanism. But if you're on a Windows 7 or a Windows 8, you can use this click-to-run technology in order to get Office on that machine as quickly as possible, literally in a matter of seconds. And I know that this has been a key challenge for a lot of companies. Typically, deploying Office to thousands of users like you have can take many months, if not years, and is quite a costly endeavor. The great thing about this click-to-run technology and the virtualization of Office means that you can run it side by side with existing versions of Office. And that's really important in terms of end-user adoption, because not only can you keep Office side by side with Office 2007 and Office 2013 right on the same machine so that end users can be getting more comfortable with 2013 but still have the ability to fall back, but it also means that if there are add-ins or macros that only work in a previous version of Office, you can keep that application and enable them to use that functionality whilst the remainder of the time when they're not needing to use that work in the most modern and up-to-date client. And a great example there is typically when I speak to customers in the EBC, it's typically a finance scenario, and they have a macro in Excel 2003 that the finance team runs once a month, and it talks to SAP or something. It's always finance, and it's always an SAP macro. But what they can do now is keep Excel 2003 for those users as an example, and then the remainder of the month, when they don't have to do this old process that it's not worth migrating off of, they can be working in the up-to-date client. The final benefit of this virtualized technology, I mentioned that Office was broken up into the components that stream down, so you're able to work more quickly as the rest of Office is coming in. That also has an impact in terms of how you update Office. Today, when we issue a security patch, you have to patch the whole client. In the future, with this virtualized, the click-to-run Office, the client is aware of the difference, the delta between its version and the new version. So it will only download and update the specific packages that have been changed, rather than doing the entire Office. So it's a lot less intensive on the bandwidth and also a lot quicker. So when we say that Office has been totally reimagined, hopefully this has given you just that little bit of an insight into what we mean by that. We've changed the deployment mechanism. It's now a virtualized client, and it's available as a service on demand and always up to date. Now, switching gears from talking more about the organizational benefits of that virtualized Office to thinking about what that means for the end user. Office as a service, if you think of, take Netflix as an example. When you log on to Netflix, whether you log on your phone, on your slate, or at in a hotel in an in-room PC, for example, it knows you. It knows what you've recently watched. It knows what you might like to watch. It's a service. Office is now a service. So what you see here on this screen, up in the top right-hand corner, is you can see that this user is authenticated and logged into Office. And that's really interesting because if you think of that online, video streaming, Netflix example that I just used, those same things are true of Office. It knows who you are. It knows what documents that you've recently been working on, in the same way that the online video service knows what videos you've been watching. So very quickly, regardless of what PC you're on, when you log into the new Office, it knows your most recently used documents, and they follow you around, which is a benefit of it being a service. Likewise, it knows your most recently used templates. I mentioned the Customer Experience Improvement Program as a way that we were able to determine how to do that sequencing of features that are streamed down. The other benefit of that data is that we know that 2/3 of the time when a user opens up Word or Excel or PowerPoint, what they do is they go and open a file. If you think of previous versions of Office, when you opened up Word, it would take you straight into a new document. And then the first thing they would do is click File and click Open. So what we're doing in this new Office, this is what you see when you log in. It's that backstage view. So rather than just bringing you a blank document, what we're bringing you straight into is an experience where you have your recent documents. And so within, a matter of seconds and fewer clicks, you're being more productive. It's a great example of how we've made Office more intuitive. What you see here is another benefit, and not only do documents follow you, your recent documents, for example, but the default save in Office is a save to the cloud. So if you've saved into SharePoint Online, or SkyDrive Pro, for example, Office is aware of where you were working in that document. So, for example, if I'm working on a document at my PC in the office, and I close that document and I go home, but later on that evening I decide to work on that document and I open it from my home PC, what you see here on the right-hand side is welcome back. Pick up where you left off. So not only does Office know your recently used documents, but it knows where you were in that document. And in one click, it'll take you back there. It's a little bit, again, it's a service. If you think of an ebook reader today, there are many on the market, but when you open up your ebook and you switch between books, it doesn't take you to the start of the book. It takes you to where you were when you finished, or stopped reading that particular book. This is the same benefit. It's about making Office a service, a personalized service, which especially if you're working on long documents, is a great time saver. I already mentioned that the save to the cloud, whether that's with SkyDrive, for personal use, or SkyDrive Pro, which is the update to SharePoint and MySites, will be the default save option in the new Office, as opposed to save to a desktop. Users will still be able to save to a desktop if they so choose, but the cloud will be the default save mechanism. And that really enables these scenarios that, so the Office knows who you are, it knows your recent documents, it knows where you left off. That's what enables those different scenarios. I touched on at the beginning that we're introducing a new application development model with the new Office. And what we're doing is we're enabling HTML5 or JavaScript developers, so really anyone who is a web developer, to write these web applications that can be surfaced within the client. So these are hosted in the cloud, hosted on SharePoint Online, and that's the mechanism by which they're made available. But you can then bring them into the client. So what you see here is an example of an Excel spreadsheet with a Bing Maps app for Office. And now this works equally well whether you're in the Excel client or in the Excel web app in the browser. And that's really key to coming back to this idea of the best productivity experience regardless of the device that you're on, that they have a consistent experience for these apps for Office, whether they're on a PC client or whether they're in a browser-based client. And crucially, again, whilst this is in Excel, this app could be used in Word, PowerPoint, OneNote, and it behaves the same in all of those different scenarios. So here, based on this data, it's using a Bing Maps web service to display that data on a map. So this is an example of the Bing Maps app for Office. This is what that looks like in Outlook. And notice how on the previous slide we were showing the app in the Excel full client. What you see here is the Outlook web app. So this is that same app working in the browser as well as in the desktop client, as I mentioned. And the really neat thing here is you've received an email. You see it says, let's meet tonight at my office. Here is my address. And the app has recognized that address format. And by clicking on the Bing Maps in this user interface, it pops up the Bing Maps web service, highlights that address, and shows you that address on the Bing Maps. And this is not a static image. You can zoom in and out. You can click to get directions. It's an interactive web experience.
How do you access these apps?
What we're able to do is make these available through SharePoint Online. So there will be a public catalog of apps for Office, which is already available on the web today. And we see developers, not only Microsoft, such as with the Bing Maps app that you see here, but also other developers. LinkedIn has written one. Hertz Car Rental has written one as an example. We see public developers and individuals writing these apps, and you can get access. Anyone who has Office 2013 can get access through SharePoint on the web. You also have the ability to write these apps yourself for internal processes. You may wish to take advantage. I used the example of the Hertz app. So you might wish your employees, if Hertz is your preferred car hire vendor, you might wish your employees to plug this into Outlook such that when they're planning a trip, they can quickly, book a Hertz car. But you could also write your own app for Office based on your expenses workflow. So if they've received an email receipt, as an example, oftentimes when you go to a restaurant or a store today, they'll offer to email a receipt to you. You could write an app for Office that would enable them to file that receipt, and in your SharePoint infrastructure. And what you have the ability to do there is control who has access to those apps. We will give you your own corporate catalog that you control and that is only available to your users. And you can then control who has access to that app within your organization based on policies, and also who is able to download that app. So there's a public aspect to this, but also a private aspect to this as well. So as we finish up cloud, I want to talk a little bit more generally about how we approach operating our cloud services. We've set a pretty high bar for ourselves, and we continue to strive to improve the compliance levels that we have. So what you see here is a list of different certifications that we have. I'd highlight this ISO 27001. It's an international standards organization certification that we have for not only our data centers, but also the Office 365 service. And it talks to how we manage and control the service. There are many others. You see a list of different acronyms here. Some are very industry specific, like the HIPAA compliance, that's for healthcare companies in the US, and also EU model clauses. That's great for international customers, especially those that have a presence in the European Union. We were the first public cloud provider that was able to sign the EU model clauses and enable compliance with the EU Privacy Directive in that sense.
Can we audit your data centers?
What we've done is we've enabled you to get access to a quarterly report provided by a third-party auditor. So if you think of the fact that we now have cloud services available in 88 different countries with tens of thousands of customers, if we were to enable thousands of customers to come through our data centers every single year to audit the service, that would break the security model that we have in place that enables us to be compliant with these certifications. So the simple answer is, unfortunately, we cannot enable you yourself as an individual customer to audit the data centers or the service. But as I mentioned, each quarter we have a third-party auditor, which at the moment I believe is Deloitte & Touche, come in and make sure that we're in compliant with the controls and the standards that have enabled us to gain these certifications. And as a customer, we then present you with this third-party report that audits our compliance to enable you to provide that to your regulators or your internal legal department as well. So running these services isn't just about compliance with standards. It's about the reliability of the services. And we're able to make investments in the service, such as with geographic redundancy of our data centers in each region, and also in the backup and the systems that we have in place to make sure that those services, if anything were to happen, fail over and replicate immediately. And what we're able to do as a result of those investments is offer a 99.9% service level agreement uptime that is financially backed. So now that we've covered devices and cloud, let's move on and talk about social and what we're doing with the new Office and social networking. Firstly, what you see here is an updated SharePoint newsfeed. And what we've done is we've brought in the social networking capabilities that people love and are very familiar with. So if you look on the right-hand side, you can see that you can follow people, documents, sites, and tags. And why is that important in a business? Well, for me as an individual, as I think about when I joined Microsoft, the way that I used to find information and learn where I needed to go for information, I would go and open up the global address list in Outlook, and I'd look at my colleagues, and I'd see which email lists that they had subscribed to updates from. And then I would go and join those email lists and get those mails, and that would be how I'd find information. Or at least the more organic way of sort of finding, information 8 years ago. Now, you can follow people. So when they download documents or comment on documents, or as you see here, like documents or people for that matter, you can get that information in your news feed that enables you to find information based on the people that you trust. It's a much more personal experience. So rather than having to go through a sort of strange way of looking in the address list and email distribution list that I used to do, now, based on who I work with and who I know and trust, I simply follow them. And the same thing goes for documents or sites. Take this new Office as an example. We have an internal site for the new Office. People are able to subscribe to that site so that when we make updates, when we add new pieces of content, they're automatically updated and notified. Another nice piece of integration here is the ability to set tasks from this newsfeed. So it's not just about the social aspect. It's also about getting things done. So you can push, say if someone comments on a new document, you can push a task from this newsfeed to check out that document at a later date. So you see this integration between the servers, in this case, SharePoint or SharePoint Online, and the client with Outlook, which is really where people look to, store their tasks. So that's a really nice piece of integration across those two worlds. Another piece of integration here is what you see with the colored bars next to people's photographs in this newsfeed. That's their presence awareness based on link. So you have a very consistent experience across the PC or the client devices, whether you're in Outlook or in the Link client, or whether you're online in SharePoint. So you can get access to people, and the contact card that you see when you click on that image, it's the same, whether you're in Outlook, whether you're in Word, whether you're in SharePoint. So it's a clean, consistent experience. And the final thing that's really nice about those contact cards is they also now not only bring in enterprise data about that individual, such as mails that you've exchanged with them and so on, but also with Facebook and LinkedIn integration built in. So if you're friends with someone on Facebook, in that contact card, you can see their status updates. So here's another example of where that persistent presence plays in. What you see here is a Word document that we're reviewing. A very common scenario where, whether it's an RFP or a document, a pitch document that your employees and end users are working on, you'll have multiple people working on this in one space. And what you see is that presence and also the ability to get access to that contact card wherever you are. The other thing that I love and that people really like about this is if you think about reviewing documents today, if you make comments or multiple comments in a document, each comment appears as a separate, bubble in that reviewer's pane on the right-hand side, which if you have a complex document like your lawyers might do in the legal department or finance for that matter, it can get very busy and quite confusing. What you see here is that the comments are now in line. You have a consistent and a continuous comments thread that is nice and collapsible, but when you click in it, you see the comments in one view. Here's an image of what that contact card looks like, and what you see here is those different aspects of the contact card. So the contact, notes, organization, what their hierarchy is, who their manager is, and then this what's new. And you can see here that this user is connected with Peter on Facebook and gets those updates. And the way I like to talk about that is, why is that important for a business? Well, the Facebook integration isn't necessarily going to, change the bottom line necessarily, but for me as an end user, I've chosen to connect with certain, colleagues on Facebook. And when I'm working with them, it's really nice to have that mix of the work and the personal. It rounds out the relationships with these people. And the example I always use is a colleague of mine called Jose. And Jose, who's from Latin America, but now works here in Redmond as well. He and I share a similar taste in music. And he often listens to music on Spotify. So when Jose and I are working together, I can click on him and look at his Facebook feed, and often I'll see that he's listening to a particular track on Spotify through that Facebook integration. And I'll just click on it, Spotify pops up, and I'm listening to the same track that Jose is listening to. It's a small little example, but it really, helps round out that relationship with him. We've made some significant investments with Lync as well. So the social networking and the real-time communication, I think, are very tied in together. And so what you see here is an updated Lync client that, again, is very consistent from a user interface perspective with the other clients that you've seen. And what I love about this example is these shared meeting notes. If you think of conference calls today, I know that or I'm certainly guilty of making fun of conference calls in the past. We all know, people are, you hear someone's dog in the background or the kids, and it's a disconnected experience. What you see here is not only what we call the gallery view or the participant gallery, but also meeting notes. So by adding in video into these conference calls, it creates a richer experience. We all know, and you look at the statistics from various anthropologists, that the majority of communication is nonverbal. So when you're on a conference call, all you get is verbal. But by adding in video, you begin to get a little bit more of those nonverbal cues, and it creates a richer experience, and also, frankly, a more valuable one. I find it much easier, certainly as a remote employee. I often like to work from home. The ability to come into these calls and see my colleagues, see who's talking. And there's a really neat feature here called Active Speaker. So Lync will promote and make more prominent the person who is actually speaking, but you can still see the other participants. That's a really nice way of, it's aware of what's going on in this call. And then the final piece that I think is great is are these shared meeting notes. So at the same time as you set up the Lync meeting in Outlook, you can actually set up shared notes. So participants can click on these shared notes, and everybody is working off of this shared OneNote. So you don't anymore need to have someone necessarily taking notes and then sending, follow-up after the call. You're doing it in real time. Everybody has access to the same thing. So by adding in the video, by adding in these shared meeting notes, it creates a richer experience that frankly should make conference calls more valuable. I alluded to this earlier as well, and one of the investments that we're making is the ability to federate between Lync and Skype. Skype was a very significant acquisition for Microsoft, and you'll see Skype integration across a range of different products. It's very much a long-term bet and investment for the company. And in the first instance for the Office division, what that means for us is that ability to federate between Lync and Skype. So in the same way today that we can federate with some of the public instant messaging clients, so that you, within your Lync client, can get access to your Windows Messenger buddies, in the same way, you'll be able to see your Skype contacts and initiate a call from Lync out to Skype and vice versa. We think it's going to be a great scenario for many businesses. So now that we've covered off on some of the social aspects, I'd like to move into and cover control and how you can offer these services to employees across a range of devices, on premises or online, but still do it in a controllable manner. One great example of that I mentioned at the outset is around this data loss prevention. We've made some significant investments to enable your employees to be more compliant with the policies that you might have for your business. A great example of this are these policy tips. So a lot of companies have regulations, whether it's a regulation that they need to adhere to in order to be compliant from an external perspective, or it could be an internal policy that you may have regarding how you handle data, personally identifiable information, credit cards, social security or national insurance numbers, that sort of data. And what you see here is an example where in this email, you can see credit card numbers. And Outlook has popped up this policy tip. This message may contain sensitive content. All recipients must be authorized to receive this content. So you're making users aware of the policy, and you have the control to allow some users to be able to send this message or not, or to be able to click to say, I'm aware and I still want to send. And on the back end, you get these reports. So you can see as an organization how compliant you're being with these policies. That then enables you to choose, how to flex, to change, or to augment those different controls that you might have. There's a lot more in this area around information rights management and so on, but this I think is a good example where we've tried to make it as easy as possible from the end user perspective to be compliant. So data loss prevention is great for keeping data in transit protected, but here what you see is an example of keeping data at rest protected. You can set organizational policies around data retention. What you see here is again an Outlook view and the ability to assign policy. So as an IT organization, you have the ability to define these policies and then allow end users to implement those based on certain conditions. So we're aiming to cover both data in transit and also data at rest. Where that all then comes together is in this e-discovery and management of that data. So you've got data in transit, data at rest, and then what happens if you need to, control or audit or search across those different areas? What you see here is a unified e-discovery portal. So leveraging some of the fast technologies that we acquired a few years back and have now integrated into SharePoint, you have one place to go for legal holds or e-discovery across Exchange, SharePoint, and file shares.
Does this search in just one silo?
No, exactly. It searches across Exchange, SharePoint, as well as file shares that you can point Fast or SharePoint to. So you can search across a range of different information areas, which enables you to be, have quicker e-discovery processes, which should ultimately save you money. The other neat thing about this and the other previous capabilities around data loss prevention as well as archiving, it's all integrated and it's part of the out-of-the-box solution. So there's less need for you to go and procure third-party add-ons, which, add cost and complexity into your environment. So we talked earlier on a little bit about this Office deployment and how we've really changed the game and are now able to have users get access to Office on demand in a matter of seconds. What I'd like to do now is show you what that looks like and give you a little bit of a demonstration. Think about a scenario for a moment where you have Katie, one of your sales forces, out on the road, and maybe she's been in client meetings all day and her battery is dead on her machine, or perhaps she didn't even take it on this trip, but she needs to get access to Office to do some work to prepare for the next day. All she needs to do is come here to the Office 365 portal online, maybe in the hotel's business center or borrowing a friend's machine, and sign in. You'll see immediately once she signs in, she's given the opportunity to install software, and in this case, install the latest version of Office. Now, if you look at this screen, what you see is that she's able to manage the PCs where she's deployed Office to. We talked earlier about the fact that Office is now a per-user service. I'm just starting off the install, and I'll explain some things as we go on. Because it's a per-user service, and as I mentioned, we've got up to 5 PCs that she, in this case, can install Office on. This is where she can manage it. So there's an element of self-service, reducing the burden on yourselves. Now, what's happened here, in a matter of seconds, the Office splash screen has popped up. So clearly, Office is being pulled down onto this machine. Think about today. Today, if you were to kick off an MSI-based install of Office, first of all, you'd have to go and download the package, unpack it, and then install it. Just the downloading of that package can easily take 5 or 10 minutes, depending on your bandwidth. What you see here is that in a matter of seconds, Office is already deployed and being installed on this machine. At the moment, it's just connecting to the account. Now, what this means is that you're able to get up and running much more quickly, even on a machine if it had a previous version of Office installed. Because this is the first time that Office has been deployed on this machine, there are just a couple of splash screens that we have to work through, and a nice video that would demonstrate to Katie some of the features that she can take advantage of in the new Office. I'm going to close that down, and hopefully what you'll see now is previously the machine had Office 2010 installed, but what you now see are the 2013 icons installed side by side. They're already on this machine. Now, if you look down here in the bottom right, you'll see that Office is installing in the background, and it's only 16% installed. But you see the PowerPoint screen, and here we are. We're already in PowerPoint, despite the fact that Office is only 16% installed. And this is, again, another benefit of that virtualized Office. Remember, we talked about the different packages and that we have this dynamic feature prioritization. So here, we've brought down the UI and the ability to get in and start working on a PowerPoint while some of the more advanced functionality comes in later. We're already up and running. The final thing that I want to point out here is the ability for this Office Click to Run to take advantage of add-ins and customizations that were already on a machine. Now, in this instance, Katie's at the Hotel Business Center or on a PC that is more of a kiosk-type scenario, say, at an airline lounge at the hotel or so on. But were she installing on a machine where she had an old version of Office and she had add-ins or customizations, the new deployment of Office can take advantage of those add-ins. So you'll see in the toolbar the plugins already deployed with 2013. So she doesn't have to go and reinstall them. So again, it's a much more familiar, personalized Office. The other example that I always like to use is around custom settings. As you may have guessed by now, I'm from England and not in America, and I like to use the English UK dictionary in Office, not the English US. When I used to install Office on a new machine, it would always default to the English US. And so it would start underlining words that, I've spelled correctly in English, but not in the English US dictionary. And it can be frustrating for an end user, especially in a global corporation such as ours. Now, Office knows that I use the English UK dictionary and has already selected that for me. So not only are you getting access to this click to run, almost instant deployment, Office on the machine in a matter of seconds, just like you saw, but it also takes advantage of local add-ins and customizations that the end user has on that machine if there was a previous version of Office on that device. So incredibly powerful, Office deployed in a matter of seconds. So you can see that this is a transformational release for Office. I've now been around and in this business for 3 releases, the 2003 to 2007, the 2007 to 2010, and now this 2010 to 2013 shift. They're all significant in their own ways, and I thought that the 2003 to 2007, with the introduction of the new user interface and the new file format, the OpenXML file format, I thought that was, a very, very big release. This one, frankly, however, is generational. It's much, much bigger than those other releases. So I think it's important to understand this shift and the opportunities that are available to organizations now as a result of the virtualization and the click-to-run technologies. Getting access deployed and delivered to a PC in a matter of seconds, it really is a game changer. And rather than spending months, if not years, on deploying Office, you can now deploy it in a matter of seconds and keep it patched and up to date very easily.
Do I have to use the cloud service to get access to Click to Run?
There's a licensing and then a deployment part of that question. And the licensing side of things is, yes, you need to use the Office 365 Pro Plus, which is that per-user subscription license that we've talked about. That's how you get access to this click-to-run and virtualized technology. But the way you deliver it, you have control over. You can deliver it as a pure cloud service, straight from the public cloud, or as an IT organization, you can pull that down and use your existing on-premises software deployment mechanism, System Center or a third-party tool, to push that out to your end users. Not only that, but you also have control over which builds you deploy. So you can choose for users to be on the latest and greatest and always up-to-date, deployed from the public cloud. Or what you can do is say, maybe the IT organization, you want to be on the latest, and it's doing that in the background updates that I mentioned earlier on, where it's just noticing the differences and patching as you go forward. So you can be experiencing the latest, and then maybe once a month, once a quarter, you choose a build that you test and that you then roll out to the rest of the organization, just to enable compatibility with the plugins and different scenarios that you might have in your business. So before I conclude, I'd just like to touch on what I think of as the areas where there's significant business value in this new Office. We've talked about features and functionality, we've talked about deployment, we've talked about different scenarios, and whilst it's early days, we have customers in the deployment programs, and we don't have rich, or full data in terms of total cost of ownership yet. It's a little bit early, but we have a couple of areas where we think that there'll be significant or valuable cost savings. And if we think about, the devices pillar, Paul, you asked the question at the outset, or you positioned that you wanted to reduce your purchasing of devices and enable employees to bring their own. And we think that that's going to be a key area where customers are going to be able to save money, but also increase employee satisfaction at the same time, because you're going to give them the ability to choose what device they use. In terms of staying connected, I think the new social networking features, especially with different demographics, will be a huge hit and a way that people will find it easier to work together and collaborate. And then you think of the reducing costs that pertain to travel or telephony by using Lync and the new conference calls and the link to Skype Federation. We talked towards the end about data loss prevention, archiving, and unified e-discovery. Those are just a couple of areas where we think that there's going to be a lot of advances and ability for you to consolidate what you may use third-party tools for, and therefore save money in that control aspect. And finally, I can't emphasize this enough, with the Office 365 Pro Plus user subscription, changing how you think about deploying Office, getting out of that MSI long cycles where you're deploying Office over months or years and spending a lot of money on that, and beginning to shift some of that into the cloud service. I think that's going to be an area where there's significant cost savings on the client, but also from a services perspective. If you procure Exchange Online, SharePoint Online, or Lync Online, as part of that per user subscription, the upgrades are already taken care of as part of that service. When the new versions of the software come out, we will commit to moving you as part of that existing subscription. So these are just to touch on some of those areas where we think there's significant business value in the new Office. So just to conclude, Office is an incredibly important business to Microsoft. It's used by over 1 billion users every single day. We have so much invested in this business, and we want to make it the best possible productivity experience across a range of different devices, whether that's from a client perspective, or as you see here again, we're already in 88 markets and 32 languages, and we're committed to continuing to roll that out with Office 365. It is crucial and core to Microsoft's business. So what are the next steps following on from this presentation? I would strongly suggest and urge you to take advantage of the customer immersion experience. Sometimes that's called different things in different subsidiaries. So in some of your global subsidiaries, my local Microsoft colleagues may call it something different. But the customer immersion experience is a wonderful way for you to get hands-on with the technology in a way that makes sense for your business. We'll show you how Office works across a range of different devices. And you can bring in not only your technology staff, but potentially also your business staff so they can begin to see and get excited about some of these new features and functionality. And also think about how it works as part of their business. And I think that's key, taking it from just being about features and functionality to having a more business-oriented conversation about what the new Office means for your business. We'd strongly encourage you to sign up for a trial. If you go to office.com/preview, this is already available. The streaming of Office direct to your PC, that was live from that preview site. So it's already there. So I would encourage you to sign up and use that today. And then work with your Microsoft account rep to do a business value assessment following those 2 stages to think about how to take advantage of this moving forward. So with that, I'd like to conclude and thank you so much for your time and making the investment to come here and visit us. And thank you very much for the business that you place with Microsoft.